I never thought retiring to Meadowbrook Heights, Colorado would turn into a legal nightmare. But there I was on a freezing February morning, watching through my living room window as a blonde woman in a cream-colored parka marched across my front lawn carrying my electric snow shovel like she'd just confiscated contraband. My name is Henry Zimmerman, and I'm a 53-year-old former insurance adjuster who moved to this planned community 3 years ago with my wife, Gloria. We thought the HOA would keep things orderly and peaceful. Instead, I got Brenda Patterson, the HOA president who treated our neighborhood like her personal fiefdom. I rushed to the front door, yanking it open just as Brenda reached the sidewalk. The cold air hit my face like a slap, but adrenaline kept me warm. "Brenda, what the hell are you doing with my snow shovel?" She turned around, her perfectly styled hair somehow immune to the wind. Her expression was that particular blend of smugness and righteous indignation that only comes from years of petty authority. "Mr. Zimmerman, this is not a snow shovel. This is a motorized vehicle, and according to Section 7, Paragraph 3 of our HOA covenant, all motorized vehicles must be stored in garages, not on porches." I stared at her, genuinely wondering if she'd lost her mind. "That's a lightweight electric snow shovel. It weighs 15 pounds. It's not a vehicle. It has a motor. It moves. That makes it motorized. I'm confiscating it until you can provide documentation that proves otherwise, or you can face a daily fine of $50. My hands clenched into fists. "You can't just take my property." "Actually, Section 12 gives me the authority to remove any items that violate our community standards. You'll get it back once you've rectified the situation." She gave me a tight smile. "Have a nice day, Mr. Zimmerman." She walked away, and I stood there in the doorway, shaking with anger and disbelief. Behind me, I heard the familiar sound of Gloria's wheelchair approaching. "Henry, what's going on? Why is the door open?" I closed it and turned to face my wife. Gloria Hayes had been Gloria Zimmerman for 28 years now, and multiple sclerosis had stolen so much from her over the past decade. First her ability to walk long distances, then her stamina, and eventually her independence. But it never touched her spirit or her sharp mind. Brenda just took the electric snow shovel. Gloria's eyes widened. "The one Dr. Morrison prescribed. Yeah, she says it's a motorized vehicle that needs to be stored in the garage. But we need it by the door. I need it by the door." Gloria's voice cracked slightly, and I saw the frustration in her face that always appeared when her disability created problems for others. The electric snow shovel wasn't just convenient for us. It was medical equipment. Dr. Morrison, Gloria's neurologist, had specifically recommended it 6 months ago when we'd had that terrible snowstorm. Gloria had been trapped inside for 3 days because I'd thrown out my back trying to clear our walkway with a regular shovel. The electric model was light enough that Gloria could use it herself for the light dustings we got, giving her a sense of independence, and it was easy enough on my aging body that I could clear heavy snow without injuring myself. "I'll get it back," I promised her. "This is insane. She can't just steal our property." "Did you explain about my condition?" I didn't get the chance. She was already walking away. Gloria wheeled herself to the window and looked out at the snow-covered street. "We're supposed to get 4 more inches tonight. How are we going to clear the walkway?" "I'll use the old shovel. Don't worry about it. Henry, you're back. We'll be fine. I'll take it slow." But I knew she was right to worry. I'd seen a doctor about my chronic back pain just last month. Years of desk work and poor posture had compressed my lower spine, and any heavy lifting could trigger spasms that left me bedridden for days. The electric snow shovel had been a godsend for both of us. I spent the rest of the morning fuming and researching. I pulled out our HOA covenant, all 87 pages of it, and read through every section. Section 7, paragraph 3 did mention motorized vehicles, but it was clearly talking about cars, motorcycles, ATVs, and similar items. There was no reasonable interpretation that included a handheld electric snow shovel. I called the HOA hotline, which went straight to voicemail. Then I tried Brenda's personal number, which she'd given to all residents for emergencies only. She answered on the 4th ring. "This is Brenda." "Brenda, it's Henry Zimmerman. We need to talk about the snow shovel." "Mr. Zimmerman, I already explained the situation. If you have documentation proving it's not a motorized vehicle, it's medical equipment for my wife. She has MS and her doctor prescribed it." There was a pause. "Prescribed a snow shovel?" "Yes, because she's disabled and we need to maintain our walkway, but traditional shovels are too hard on my back. This allows us to keep our home accessible without risking injury." "I'm sure your wife's condition is challenging, but rules are rules. Everyone in Meadowbrook Heights has to follow the same standards. I can't make exceptions just because. This isn't about exceptions. You took medical equipment, that's theft." Her voice turned icy. "Are you threatening me, Mr. Zimmerman?" "I'm stating facts. You took property that doesn't violate any reasonable interpretation of our covenants, and that property is necessary for my wife's mobility and safety. The HOA board will review your case at our next meeting. That's in 3 weeks. Until then, the shovel remains in my possession." "Goodbye, Mr. Zimmerman." She hung up. I looked at Gloria, who was watching me with worried eyes. 3 weeks. 3 weeks, I confirmed. That afternoon, I called Dr. Morrison's office and explained the situation to his nurse. She was sympathetic and said she'd have the doctor write a letter documenting his recommendation. But she also warned me it would take a few days to process, because Dr. Morrison was at a conference in Chicago. The snow started falling around 6 that evening. Big, heavy flakes that accumulated fast. By 9 o'clock, we had 6 inches on the ground and our walkway was buried. I grabbed the old manual shovel from the garage and started clearing. Within 10 minutes, I felt the familiar twinge in my lower back. By 20 minutes, it was a sharp pain. By the time I'd cleared halfway down our 30-foot walkway, I could barely stand up straight. Gloria opened the front door. "Henry, stop. You're hurting yourself." "Almost done," I grunted, pushing through another shovelful. "No, stop now. Come inside." I wanted to argue, but another spasm shot through my back, and I nearly dropped the shovel. I limped inside, and Gloria handed me ice and ibuprofen. "This is exactly what the electric shovel was supposed to prevent," she said quietly. I spent the next day in bed, my back in agony. Gloria called our neighbor, Ted Richter, who kindly finished clearing our walkway. But Ted was 72 years old himself, and I felt guilty asking him to do work I should have been able to handle. On day 3, I dragged myself to the computer and started drafting a formal complaint to the HOA board. I outlined the situation, cited the relevant covenant sections, and explained why Brenda's interpretation was unreasonable. I attached photos of the electric snow shovel, showing its size and design, and I mentioned Gloria's medical condition. I emailed it to all 5 board members: Brenda Patterson, President; Richard Montgomery, Vice President; Susan Kowalski, Treasurer; Dale Freeman, Secretary; and Jennifer Yates, Member at Large. Only Jennifer responded, and her email was brief: "Received your complaint. The board will address it at the next meeting. Please be patient." Patient. Easy for her to say. 2 days later, Dr. Morrison's letter arrived. It was beautifully detailed, explaining Gloria's condition, her limited mobility, the importance of maintaining clear walkways for her wheelchair access, and his specific recommendation for a lightweight electric snow shovel as adaptive equipment. He used medical terminology and cited studies about MS patients and environmental accessibility. I made 3 copies and emailed it to the HOA board, then printed one to deliver to Brenda in person. I drove to her house, a massive colonial-style home on the nicest street in Meadowbrook Heights. She answered the door wearing yoga pants and a scowl. "Mr. Zimmerman, I have the documentation you requested." I held out the letter. She took it but didn't open it. "The board will review everything at the meeting." "Brenda, this is ridiculous. Just give me back the shovel." "You have proof now that it's medical equipment. The board will make that determination, not me individually." "You took it individually." Her jaw tightened. "Are we done here? Where's the shovel now?" "That's none of your concern. It's my property." "It's absolutely my concern. It's in a secure location. You'll get it back if the board rules in your favor." "When the board rules in my favor," I corrected. She smiled thinly. "We'll see." "Good day, Mr. Zimmerman." The door closed in my face. I stood there for a moment, contemplating my options. I could call the police, report the theft. But would they even take it seriously? It was an HOA dispute, and cops generally hated getting involved in those. I could hire a lawyer, but that would cost thousands of dollars, and we were on a fixed income from my pension and Gloria's disability benefits. Instead, I drove to the Meadowbrook Heights Community Center, where the HOA held its meetings. The receptionist, a young woman named Ashley, looked up from her computer. "Can I help you? I need to get on the agenda for the next board meeting." "Oh, you'd need to submit a request to the board president at least 1 week in advance." "Can I do that now? The meeting is in 2.5 weeks, so yes, that should work. Let me get you the form." She handed me a paper that asked for my name, address, the nature of my concern, and how much time I'd need to present. I filled it out quickly, requesting 15 minutes to address the board about the unlawful confiscation of medical equipment. Ashley read it and frowned. "This is about Mrs. Patterson taking your snow shovel. You heard about that? Everyone's heard about it. Mrs. Patterson has been telling people you were storing hazardous equipment on your porch." My blood pressure spiked. "Hazardous? It's a snow shovel." Ashley shrugged sympathetically. "I'm just telling you what I heard. I'll make sure the board gets your request." Over the next 2 weeks, the situation escalated in ways I never anticipated. First, I received a formal notice from the HOA citing me for an unmaintained walkway because we'd had another light snow and I hadn't been able to clear it completely due to my back pain. The fine was $75. Then I got a citation for having our trash cans visible from the street more than 12 hours before pickup. That was another $50, even though our cans were in the exact same spot they'd been for 3 years. Then came a violation notice for having a wreath on our door that was not in compliance with community aesthetic standards because it had artificial berries that were too red and therefore visually jarring. I knew exactly what was happening. Brenda was retaliating. Gloria was stressed to the point of making her symptoms worse. Her tremors increased and she had trouble sleeping. I found her crying one afternoon, something she rarely did. "I feel like such a burden," she whispered. "Don't you dare say that. You're not a burden. Brenda is a petty tyrant and I'm going to fight this. What if we just let it go? Pay the fines, buy a new snow shovel? No, this is the principle of the thing. She can't just steal from people and bully them. What happens to the next person she targets?" Gloria nodded, wiping her eyes. "You're right, I just hate conflict. I know. But sometimes conflict is necessary." I spent hours preparing for the HOA meeting. I printed copies of Dr. Morrison's letter, the relevant covenant sections, photos of the electric snow shovel, and a timeline of Brenda's actions. I researched Colorado property law and disability rights legislation. I even found a few legal precedents where HOAs had been sued for disability discrimination. The night of the meeting arrived. It was held in the community center's main hall, a bland room with folding chairs and fluorescent lights. About 40 residents were there, which was a high turnout. Apparently, word had spread about the dispute. Brenda sat at a table at the front with the other board members. She wore a burgundy blazer and had her hair pulled back in a severe bun. When Gloria and I entered, I swear I saw her jaw clench. We took seats in the front row. Ted Richter was there, along with several other neighbors I recognized. Some gave us encouraging nods. Others looked away uncomfortably. The meeting started with standard business: approval of minutes, treasurer's report, discussion of landscaping bids. I barely paid attention, my knee bouncing with nervous energy. Finally, after 45 minutes, Brenda said, "We now move to resident concerns. Henry Zimmerman has requested time to address the board." I stood up, gathering my papers. Gloria squeezed my hand. "Good evening. My name is Henry Zimmerman, and I live at 847 Pinecrest Drive." On February 8th, HOA President Brenda Patterson came to my property and confiscated my electric snow shovel, claiming it violated the covenant regarding motorized vehicles. I'm here tonight to request its immediate return and to address what I believe is a serious overreach of HOA authority. I handed out my prepared materials to the board members. Brenda took hers without looking at it. "First, let me address the covenant issue. Section 7, paragraph 3 states that motorized vehicles must be stored in garages. However, this section clearly refers to vehicles in the traditional sense: cars, motorcycles, ATVs, and similar equipment. A handheld electric snow shovel, which weighs 15 pounds and is designed for light snow removal, does not reasonably fall under this category." By Miss Patterson's logic, we'd have to store electric toothbrushes, power drills, and electric can openers in our garages because they're motorized. A few people in the audience chuckled. Brenda's expression remained stony. Second, and more importantly, this electric snow shovel is medical equipment. My wife, Gloria, has multiple sclerosis and uses a wheelchair. Dr. Morrison, her neurologist, specifically recommended this device to maintain safe access to our home. I have his letter here, which I've provided to the board. Taking this equipment isn't just a covenant dispute. It's a violation of disability rights under the Fair Housing Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act, which require reasonable accommodations for disabled residents. Richard Montgomery, the vice president, was reading Dr. Morrison's letter with a furrowed brow. Susan Kowalski looked uncomfortable. Third, since this confiscation, I've received multiple citations for minor violations that have never been enforced before. I believe this constitutes harassment and retaliation. I have documentation of all citations here. I held up the papers. Brenda finally spoke. "Mr. Zimmerman, the citations you've received are for legitimate violations that were brought to my attention. The timing is coincidental." "Is it? I've had the same wreath on my door every December for 3 years. Why is it suddenly a problem now?" "Perhaps no one noticed before. Or perhaps you're targeting me because I dared to question your authority." The room went silent. Brenda's face flushed. Richard cleared his throat. "Mrs. Patterson, where is Mr. Zimmerman's snow shovel currently located?" "In my garage in a secure area." "And you took it because you believed it violated the motorized vehicle clause." "That's correct." "Did you discuss this with the full board before confiscating a resident's property?" Brenda hesitated. I acted under my authority as president to enforce covenant violations. That's not what I asked. Did you consult with the board? No. It was a clear violation. I didn't think consultation was necessary. Richard looked at the other board members. Dale Freeman was nodding along with everything Brenda said, but Susan and Jennifer both looked troubled. Jennifer spoke up. I have to say, after reading Dr. Morrison's letter, I'm concerned that we may be running afoul of disability law here. The Fair Housing Act is pretty explicit about reasonable accommodations. We're not discriminating, Brenda insisted. We're enforcing the covenants equally. But that's not how accommodation works, I interjected. Equal treatment isn't the same as fair treatment when someone has a disability. That's the whole point of the ADA. Susan leaned forward. Mr. Zimmerman, I apologize for asking, but how exactly does the snow shovel help your wife? Gloria spoke up from her wheelchair, her voice clear despite her tremor. I can use it myself for light snow. It's lightweight and easy to manage, which gives me independence. When the snow is heavier, it allows my husband to clear our walkway without injuring himself. He has chronic back problems, and using a regular shovel has put him in bed for days. If our walkway isn't clear, I can't leave the house. I can't get to my doctor appointments, my physical therapy, or even just go outside for fresh air. We're essentially trapped. Several people in the audience murmured sympathetically. I saw Ted nodding vigorously. Richard put down the letter. Mrs. Patterson, I think we need to return Mr. Zimmerman's property immediately and vote on whether this situation constitutes a covenant violation. This seems like a straightforward accommodation issue to me. We can't just cave every time someone claims a medical need, Brenda argued. What's next? Someone says they need to park their RV in their driveway for medical reasons. Someone needs to paint their house purple because it's therapeutic. That's a slippery slope fallacy, I said. We're talking about a 15-pound snow shovel that was sitting on a porch. There's no reasonable comparison to an RV or painting a house. Dale Freeman finally spoke. He was a thin man in his 60s with a pinched face. I think Brenda has a point about precedent. If we allow this, we're opening the door to all sorts of exceptions. It's not an exception, I said, struggling to keep my voice level. It's a legal accommodation. The law requires it. You don't have a choice unless you want the HOA to get sued. Brenda's eyes flashed. Are you threatening to sue the HOA? I'm stating a fact. If you continue to withhold medical equipment and discriminate against a disabled resident, yes, we could pursue legal action. I'd rather not. I'd rather you just return my property and we can all move on. Richard called for a vote. All in favor of returning Mr. Zimmerman's snow shovel and recognizing it as a reasonable accommodation under disability law. Richard, Susan, and Jennifer raised their hands. Opposed, Brenda and Dale raised theirs. Motion carries 3-2. Mrs. Patterson, please return the snow shovel to Mr. Zimmerman tonight. Brenda's face was bright red. Fine. Meeting adjourned. She stood up abruptly and walked out of the room. The audience erupted in conversation. Several neighbors came up to congratulate us. Ted shook my hand. That was something else. I can't believe she actually confiscated your shovel in the first place. I can, said a woman I didn't know well, Martha Chen from Oakmont Lane. Brenda's been getting worse for years. Last summer, she fined me $200 because my rose bushes were 6 inches taller than the approved height limit. There's an approved height limit for rose bushes, I asked. Apparently. It's buried somewhere in the covenants. I ended up trimming them, but it was ridiculous. Other people shared their own stories. Brenda had apparently been terrorizing the neighborhood for years, but most people just paid the fines or complied with her demands because fighting seemed too exhausting. We waited in the parking lot for Brenda to bring the snow shovel. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. Finally, Richard came out. I just called her. She says she's too upset to drive and will have to pick it up from her house. Of course she does, I muttered. Richard looked embarrassed. I'll go with you if you want. The three of us drove to Brenda's house in our separate cars. She answered the door with the snow shovel in hand and practically threw it at me. Here. Happy now? Not particularly. I wish none of this had happened. You made a spectacle of yourself tonight. Everyone thinks I'm some kind of monster. You took medical equipment from a disabled woman. What did you expect? I expect people to follow the rules. But apparently that's too much to ask in this neighborhood anymore. She looked at Richard. And you, undermining me in front of the entire community, don't expect my support when you run for president next year. Richard's expression hardened. Brenda, you're out of control. This isn't about rules. It's about you needing to dominate every situation. The board has been tiptoeing around your behavior for too long. How dare you? I'm done. I'll be submitting my resignation from the board tomorrow. I can't be part of this anymore. He turned and walked back to his car. Brenda stood there, speechless, then slammed the door. I carried the snow shovel to our car where Gloria was waiting. She looked at it like it was a precious artifact. Let's go home, she said quietly. We thought it was over. We were wrong. 2 days later, we received a certified letter from the HOA. Inside was a notice of violation for disrupting an HOA meeting and making defamatory statements against an HOA board member. The fine was $500. I read it 3 times, certain I was hallucinating. I'd done nothing but present facts and request the return of my property. Nothing I'd said was defamatory. I called Jennifer Yates, who'd seemed the most reasonable of the board members. Jennifer, did you know about this fine? She sighed. I just found out this morning. Brenda sent it without board approval. That's not legal under our bylaws. Any fine over $200 requires a board vote. So what can I do? Show up to the emergency board meeting I just called for tomorrow night. We need to address this before it gets even more out of hand. The emergency meeting was smaller, just the board members and a handful of residents who'd heard about it through the neighborhood grapevine. Richard had indeed resigned, so there were only 4 board members present. Jennifer started the meeting. I called this session because President Patterson issued a $500 fine to Henry Zimmerman without board approval, which violates our bylaws. I moved to void the fine. Susan immediately seconded. Brenda looked furious. That fine was warranted. He disrupted the meeting and made false accusations. He presented documented facts and requested the return of his property, Jennifer said. That's not disruption, and he didn't make false accusations. He stated that he'd received multiple citations after your confrontation with him, which is true. His tone was disrespectful. Being disrespectful isn't a finnable offense. We're not a dictatorship. Dale Freeman spoke up. I think we need to support our president. If residents can attack board members without consequences, no one attacked anyone, Susan interrupted. Henry advocated for himself and his wife. That's allowed. That's encouraged. This fine is retaliatory, and frankly, I'm worried about the HOA's liability if we don't void it. They voted. 3-1 to void the fine, with Dale dissenting. Brenda stood up. Fine. Clearly this board doesn't respect my leadership. I'll be calling for a special election to recall all of you. Jennifer didn't blink. That's your right under the bylaws, but in the meantime the fine is voided. Over the next week, the neighborhood divided into camps. There were the Brenda supporters, mostly older residents who liked strict rule enforcement and saw us as troublemakers. Then there were the reformers, who wanted Brenda out and the HOA rules relaxed. And then there was the majority in the middle, who just wanted the drama to end. Brenda started a petition to recall Jennifer, Susan, and the now absent Richard, even though he'd already resigned. She needed signatures from 30% of homeowners to trigger a recall election. Meanwhile, someone created a Facebook group called Meadowbrook Heights HOA Reform that quickly gained 200 members. People shared their Brenda horror stories. The Rosebush incident. A family who'd been fined for having their garage door open longer than 30 minutes. A retired veteran who'd been cited for displaying an American flag that was too large. The group organized a counter-petition to recall Brenda instead. They needed the same 30% threshold. Gloria and I tried to stay out of the political warfare, but it was hard when people kept asking us to take sides. We signed the petition to recall Brenda, but I didn't campaign for it. I just wanted my life back. Then things took a darker turn. One morning, I went outside to find that someone had spray painted "Entitled" across our garage door in red paint. Gloria was devastated. I called the police. An officer came out, took photos and a report, but was honest with me. Without witnesses or security footage, there's not much we can do. It's vandalism, but it's he said, she said territory. I know who did it, or at least who's responsible. You think it's your HOA president or someone she riled up. The officer looked uncomfortable. Sir, I can't investigate based on suspicion. If you had evidence, I get it. Ted helped me paint over the graffiti that afternoon. While we worked, he told me he'd heard that Brenda was telling people we were trying to destroy the neighborhood's property values by challenging the rules. She's claiming that if we allow medical accommodations, next people will stop maintaining their lawns or painting their houses, and home values will plummet, Ted said. It's nonsense, but some people are buying it. The recall petitions both reached their signature thresholds within 2 weeks. The HOA was required to hold a special election within 30 days. The ballot would have 2 questions. Should Brenda Patterson be removed as president? Should Jennifer Yates and Susan Kowalski be removed from the board? The neighborhood became a war zone of yard signs and Facebook arguments. I watched it all with a mix of guilt and anger. This had spiraled so far beyond a snow shovel. Then, the day before the election, something happened that changed everything. I was at the grocery store when my phone rang. It was Ted. Henry, you need to get home. The police are at Brenda's house. What? Why? I don't know all the details, but apparently someone broke into her garage and there was some kind of confrontation. I heard she pulled a gun. My stomach dropped. Is anyone hurt? I don't think so, but there are 3 cop cars here. I rushed home. The scene on Brenda's street was chaotic. Police cars, an ambulance, and at least 30 neighbors standing around. I found Jennifer in the crowd. What happened? From what I heard, someone tried to break into Brenda's garage around 2 this afternoon. She confronted them with a gun and fired a warning shot. The person ran, but Brenda called the police. Do they know who it was? No. But here's the thing. Some neighbors are saying they saw Dale Freeman's car parked nearby around that time. Dale, why would he break into Brenda's garage? Jennifer lowered her voice. There's been a rumor going around that Brenda's been keeping HOA funds in her house instead of the bank. I didn't believe it, but maybe there's something to it. A police officer emerged from Brenda's house with a box of documents. Then another came out with a laptop. Brenda followed, arguing with them. This is ridiculous. I'm the victim here. Someone tried to rob me and you're treating me like a criminal. Madam, we have a warrant to examine HOA financial records. We've been informed that you may have been misappropriating funds. That's a lie. Who told you that? We received an anonymous tip. The district attorney's office will be reviewing the records. I watched in disbelief as they loaded boxes into their cars. Brenda stood on her lawn, her face pale, her hands shaking. The story came out over the next few days. Apparently, Susan Kowalski, the HOA treasurer, had noticed discrepancies in the financial records and had quietly contacted a forensic accountant. The accountant found that over $40,000 was missing from HOA funds over the past 3 years. Brenda had been siphoning money and using it for personal expenses, claiming they were HOA-related costs. When Dale found out he might be implicated as secretary who'd signed off on some of the financial reports, he'd apparently panicked and tried to retrieve certain documents from Brenda's house. That's when she'd confronted him with the gun. Dale was arrested for attempted burglary. Brenda was arrested for embezzlement and misuse of HOA funds. The gun incident was still under investigation, but because she'd fired the weapon recklessly in a residential area, she was facing additional charges. The special election was canceled. Jennifer became acting president, and the board appointed 2 new members from the reform group. Their first act was to hire a law firm to help the HOA recover the stolen funds and to completely rewrite the covenants with input from all residents. Gloria and I attended the first community meeting under the new board. The atmosphere was completely different. People actually smiled. Jennifer started by apologizing for the chaos and promising transparency going forward. "We're going to simplify the rules," she said. "Focus on things that actually matter, like property maintenance and safety, and stop policing every tiny detail of how people live. And we're going to establish clear processes for requesting accommodations, especially for medical needs, so what happened to the Zimmermans never happens again." There was applause. Gloria squeezed my hand. Over the next few months, things slowly returned to normal. The covenants were rewritten and were now only 30 pages instead of 87. The new rules were reasonable and focused on genuine community concerns, not aesthetics and control. Brenda pled guilty to embezzlement and was sentenced to 18 months in prison and ordered to pay full restitution. Dale pled guilty to attempted burglary and got probation and community service. I saw Brenda one more time before she went to prison. I was at the community center dropping off some documents for Jennifer when Brenda walked in to collect her personal items from what had been her office. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. When she saw me, she stopped. "Mr. Zimmerman." "Brenda." We stood there awkwardly. Finally, she spoke. "I suppose you're happy about all this." "No, I'm not happy that any of this happened. I just wanted my snow shovel back." "It was never about the snow shovel." "I know. It was about control, but you controlled yourself right into prison." She flinched. "I was trying to keep this community beautiful and orderly. I was trying to protect property values. You were on a power trip, and you stole $40,000. That money was for HOA expenses. The forensic accountant found receipts for your vacation to Cancun, your new patio furniture, and your daughter's college tuition. Those aren't HOA expenses." She didn't have an answer for that. She just picked up her box and walked past me. "For what it's worth," I said, "I hope you get help. This obsession with control, it's not healthy." She paused at the door but didn't turn around. "I hope your wife is doing well." Then she was gone. Gloria and I celebrated our 29th wedding anniversary that spring with a small party in our backyard. The new HOA rules allowed for reasonable outdoor gatherings and several neighbors came by. Jennifer brought wine. Ted brought a cake. Martha brought her famous enchiladas. Susan Kowalski pulled me aside at one point. "I owe you an apology. I should have stood up to Brenda sooner." I knew she was out of control, but I was afraid of conflict. We're all afraid of conflict. That's how people like Brenda get power. Well, never again. I'm staying on the board to make sure we don't get another dictator. As the sun set, I stood on our porch with Gloria, watching our neighbors laugh and talk in the yard. The electric snow shovel sat in its usual spot by the door, ready for next winter. "You know what the best part of all this is?" Gloria said. "What's that?" We stood up for ourselves. We didn't just accept being bullied, and look what happened. The whole neighborhood is better now. She was right. The HOA had reformed. 18 families who'd been planning to move because of Brenda's tyranny had decided to stay. Property values had actually increased because people wanted to live in a reasonable community, not a police state. I thought about how close we'd come to just accepting the loss of the snow shovel, paying whatever fines Brenda demanded, and keeping our heads down. That would have been easier in the short term, but it also would have meant living in fear, letting injustice stand, and allowing Brenda to continue hurting other people. Sometimes you have to fight, even when you're tired and scared. Sometimes standing up for something small, like a snow shovel, becomes standing up for something much bigger, like dignity and justice and the right to live without being bullied. The next winter brought heavy snow to Meadowbrook Heights. I used the electric snow shovel to clear our walkway every morning, and sometimes I'd do Ted's walkway too, and Martha's, and anyone else who needed help. The device that had caused so much trouble became a symbol of community support. Gloria's MS continued to progress, as it always would, but she maintained her independence and spirit. On the lighter snow days, she'd bundle up and use the shovel herself, clearing a path from our door to the street, proving to herself and the world that she was still capable, still strong. One afternoon, I was clearing snow when a moving truck pulled up to the house at the end of the street. Brenda's old house. She'd lost it in the restitution settlement, and it had been on the market for months. A young couple got out, looking excited and nervous. I walked over to introduce myself. "Welcome to the neighborhood. I'm Henry Zimmerman." "Jake and Melissa Torres," the man said, shaking my hand. "We're so excited to be here. We looked at a lot of communities, but everyone said Meadowbrook Heights had really turned things around recently." It has. We had some problems with an overzealous HOA president, but that's been resolved. The new board is great. "We heard something about that," Melissa said. "Our realtor mentioned there'd been some drama, but she said you were the one who stood up to the old president." "My wife and I fought back against some unreasonable rules. A lot of people helped make changes happen." Jake looked at the electric snow shovel in my hands. "Is that one of those lightweight electric models? We've been looking at those." Melissa has rheumatoid arthritis, and regular shovels are too hard on her joints. "This one's great. And don't worry, the new HOA rules explicitly allow medical equipment and adaptive devices. You won't have any problems." They both looked relieved. "That's wonderful." Our last neighborhood had an HOA that gave us nothing but grief about accommodation requests. Not here. Not anymore. I helped them unload a few boxes, and Gloria came out to introduce herself to Melissa. The two of them hit it off immediately, bonding over their shared experience with disability and chronic illness. As I watched them talk and laugh, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was what community was supposed to be. People helping each other, supporting each other, making allowances for each other's needs and circumstances. It had taken a battle to get here. It had taken stress and confrontation and legal threats and ultimately the exposure of crimes. But we'd made it. Meadowbrook Heights was finally the place we'd hoped it would be when we moved here. That evening, Gloria and I sat in our living room with hot chocolate, watching the snow fall outside our window. The neighborhood was peaceful, blanketed in white, quiet and beautiful. "Do you ever regret moving here?" Gloria asked. "Before the changes, sometimes. But now, no, this is home. Even after everything that happened, especially after everything that happened, we made this place better. We stood up for what was right and it mattered." She smiled and leaned her head on my shoulder. "You're a good man, Henry Zimmerman. You're pretty great yourself, Gloria Zimmerman." We sat there in comfortable silence, two people who'd been through hell together and come out stronger. The electric snow shovel sat by the door, ready for tomorrow's snow. Not just a tool, but a reminder that sometimes the smallest things are worth fighting for, and sometimes fighting for the smallest things leads to the biggest changes. Outside, the snow continued to fall, soft and steady, covering everything in a clean white blanket. Tomorrow I'd clear the walkways again, and the day after and the day after that, for as long as we lived in Meadowbrook Heights. And I'd do it without fear, without looking over my shoulder for citations and fines, without worrying that some petty tyrant would take away the tools I needed to care for my wife and maintain our home. That was freedom. That was justice. That was worth every moment of the fight. The weeks turned to months, and life in Meadowbrook Heights settled into a comfortable rhythm. The reformed HOA actually became an asset to the community rather than a burden. Jennifer organized neighborhood events that brought people together. Susan ensured the finances were transparent and properly managed. The new board members brought fresh perspectives and genuine desire to serve rather than control. I continued to use the electric snow shovel through that winter and into the next. It became a familiar sight in the neighborhood, and sometimes other residents would stop to ask about it, especially those with their own mobility issues or health concerns. I was always happy to demonstrate and recommend where they could get one. The story of our fight with Brenda became something of a legend in Meadowbrook Heights, passed on to new residents as a cautionary tale about HOA overreach and a triumph of common sense over petty tyranny. Some people treated me like a hero, which made me uncomfortable. I'd just been a man trying to get his property back and protect his wife, but I understood why it resonated. So many people had their own stories of being pushed around by HOAs, by bureaucrats, by anyone with a tiny bit of power and a desire to wield it. Our story was their story, and our victory was their victory. Gloria's health had its ups and downs, as MS always does. But she remained active in the community, joining the new Neighborhood Accessibility Committee that Jennifer had formed. The committee reviewed all HOA rules and community facilities to ensure they were friendly to residents with disabilities. It was meaningful work that gave Gloria purpose and allowed her to help others facing similar challenges. I eventually retired fully and spent my days maintaining our home, volunteering at the community center, and enjoying the simple pleasures of life without constant conflict. The chronic back pain never went away completely, but managing it was so much easier with the right tools. Every time I picked up that electric snow shovel, I thought about how different things could have been. If Brenda hadn't been caught embezzling, she might still be in power, still tormenting residents, still making life miserable for anyone who didn't conform to her vision of perfection. If we hadn't fought back, nothing would have changed, but we did fight back, and everything changed. That, I think, is the real lesson of the whole ordeal. Evil thrives when good people stay silent. Tyranny grows when decent people decide that going along is easier than standing up. Change happens when ordinary people find the courage to say, "No, this isn't right, and I won't accept it." I was just a retired insurance adjuster with a bad back and a disabled wife. Gloria was just a woman with MS trying to maintain her independence and dignity. We weren't activists or lawyers or politicians. We were just regular people who'd been pushed too far. And sometimes that's all it takes. As I finish this story, sitting at my desk and looking out at the snow-covered street, I see our neighbors coming and going, living their lives in peace. Ted is walking his dog. Martha is collecting her mail. The Torah's family is building a snowman in their yard with their kids. This is what we fought for. Not just a snow shovel, though that was important. Not just to defeat Brenda, though that was necessary. We fought for the right to live without fear, to be treated with basic human decency, to have our needs respected and our dignity preserved. We fought for community in its truest sense, where people support each other instead of tearing each other down, where rules serve the residents instead of the residents serving the rules, where power is a responsibility rather than a weapon. And we won. The electric snow shovel still sits by our front door, ready for the next snowfall. It's a little beat up now, showing signs of wear from years of use. But it works perfectly, just as it did on the day Brenda took it from our porch. That seems fitting somehow. We're all a little beat up from life's challenges, showing signs of wear from the battles we've fought. But we keep going, we keep working, we keep standing up for what matters, and that's enough. That's everything, really. Gloria calls me from the kitchen. Dinner's ready. I save this document, close my laptop, and head to join my wife. Tomorrow there might be more snow to clear, more challenges to face, more obstacles to overcome. But tonight, in this moment, in this home, in this community that we helped transform, everything is exactly as it should be. And the electric snow shovel waits patiently by the door, no longer just a tool, but a symbol of perseverance, justice, and the power of ordinary people to create extraordinary change.